Greetings, deep divers. It's Maddie from madeupbymaddie.com, closing out this magical decade on the dive. For this week's transformation, my inspiration is Woodstock, and the cover of the movie featuring concert footage. It's the summer of '69 and Woodstock is finally here. Now, I have more later in the episode about this epic festival. I'm just really excited to finally do some body paint. And today we come to the end of the line, closing the chapter in 1969. Without further ado, let's jump in. And now for the headlines of 1969. Becoming the very first black woman elected to Congress the previous year, Shirley Chisholm starts her historic first term on January 3, 1969. Born to immigrant parents, this school teacher ended up serving 7 successful terms in Congress, even making a bid for presidency, running for the Democratic nomination only 3 short years later. June 28, 1969, brought upon the Stonewall riots in New York City, sparking the modern gay liberation movement. Tired of continuing police harassment based on their sexual identity, a group of patrons at the Stonewall Inn resisted arrest, inciting a massive riot that lasted for days. A pivotal moment in history, this uprising brought visibility to the issue of not only gay rights, but human rights, as this movement transcended other marginalized minority groups. Astronaut Neil Armstrong was famously quoted as saying, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," as he became the first person to walk on the moon's surface after Apollo 11's successful landing on July 20th, 1969. The moon landing was a pivotal moment in aerospace history, not only because of what it taught us about the moon's composition, but it also inched the US one step further in the great space race. Woodstock, the legendary music festival, kicked off on August 15, 1969 in Bethel, New York. Billed as 3 days of peace and music, the monumental event pulled in an estimated 500,000 concertgoers, with performances by The Who, Janis Joplin, Sly and the Family Stone, Joan Baez, Ravi Shankar, and Santana. This moment was forever solidified in pop culture and was a huge happening for the counterculture of the 1960s. Now I'll be sharing the 9 albums I listened to in 1969. On Sunday, I listened to 2 Led Zeppelin albums, their self-titled debut, Led Zeppelin, and Led Zeppelin 2. And because it's the last year of the 60s, I decided to go big this week, kicking off Sunday by listening to 2 albums, Led Zeppelin 1 and Led Zeppelin 2. Just as explosive as the debut album's covers suggest, the band fires right out of the gate, releasing 2 epic albums in their first year. Their first record, released in January, was bold and brash, showcasing the musical chops of the band, as well as singer Jimmy Page's vocal range. Songs like Dazed and Confused and Your Time Is Gonna Come border on experimental territory, while Black Mountain Side remains a personal favorite with its rolling guitar. Its sequel, as equally compelling, came only 9 months later, yielding Zeppelin's biggest hit, Whole Lotta Love. Both albums bring the noise and are great when listened to back to back. My favorites off the first record, Black Mountain Side and Dazed and Confused. And my favorites off Led Zeppelin 2, Thank You, Ramble On, and Bring It On Home. And on Monday, I listened to Oxa Moxa by the Grateful Dead. I gave this album a listen as the Grateful Dead were undeniably huge in their cultural impact, especially in the Haight-Ashbury. I was completely unfamiliar with them, so I came in with an open mind. This album has a mystic quality to it. It's very much a product of its time, though. The height of folk meets psychedelic rock. My favorite off this album, just one song, Dupree's Diamond Blues. Tuesday brought Abbey Road by the Beatles. This was my last foray into the Beatles' 60s catalog. A sophisticated and sleek sound, Abbey Road is the perfect punctuation to the end of the 60s. Instead of gushing about this one like I normally would, I would say just give it a listen. My favorites off this record, Come Together, Something, Maxwell Silver Hammer, Oh Darling, Octopus's Garden, I Want You, Here Comes the Sun, and Because. On Wednesday, I listened to 2 albums as well, this time by Creedence Clearwater, Green River and Willie and the Poor Boys. Cramming in as much 60s music as I could, I jumped at the chance to fit 2 CCR albums into one day of listening. Astoundingly enough, Creedence Clearwater recorded 3 in 1969. Both of the albums I listened to feature bayou rock that swayed me, which is impressive for this California band that couldn't have hailed farther from swampy origins. These albums are equally terrific and genius. I'm glad to have spent a whole day in their musical presence. My favorites off Green River are Commotion, Lodi, and Bad Moon Rising. And my favorites off Willie and the Poor Boys, Cotton Fields, Fortunate Son, and The Midnight Special. On Thursday, I listened to Kick Out the Jams by MC5. Is it garage rock? Is it punk? Who cares? It's sludgy, it's raw, it's live. A bold move indeed, MC5 trudges on the scene, releasing a live recording of their set over 2 separate evenings. Not relying on flashy studio technique, the members roll up their sleeves and get to work, kicking out all the jams in under 40 minutes. My favorites off this record, Kick Out the Jams and Ramblin' Rose. On Friday, I listened to the Jackson 5's debut album. Diana Ross presents the Jackson 5. It's about time we've heard something from the Jackson family. On this debut album, the Jackson 5 arrived in style, offering their group dynamic to deliver the catchiest songs, foreshadowing what was to come from them in the next decade. Michael was only 10 years old when they began recording their epic first record, and sang on 10 out of the 12 tracks. This album also peaked at number 5 on the Billboard 200 the following year. My favorites off this record, Zippity Doo Dah, I Want You Back, Who's Lovin' You, and Stan. And finally, ending my journey in 1969, I listened to Isaac Hayes' Hot Buttered Soul on Saturday. I felt the need to leave this decade in style. I made the right decision to land on Isaac Hayes' second album. With only 4 tracks, this record comes in at 45 minutes, packed full of both soul and substance. Hayes' voice is the epitome of cool. His lyrics are sexy and deep. A great send-off to one of the greatest decades of music. My favorite song of the 4, Hyperbolic, Syllabic, Sesquidally Mystic. And now it's movie time. Alright, so kicking off the week, I watched Easy Rider. I know that this movie has a huge cult following. It was huge for the counterculture of the time. It was an adventure, to say the least. It has Dennis Hopper, Peter Fonda, Jack Nicholson, who's brilliant in the movie. Just classic Jack Nicholson. He's hilarious and crazy. It deals with smuggling, the counterculture of substance use in the 1960s. It has a very cool air about it. It's lovable bad boys, just riding down the road on their motorcycles. It's getting into trouble. A lot of twists and turns. Really cool watch. Also recommend. Okay, so for my last scary movie of the 60s, I chose The Cremator. The movie is from Czechoslovakia. It is subtitled, of course. It's set in Prague in the 1930s, however. It's about a man who cremates people, who kills people. You do the math. The lead actor in this movie, whose name I can't really pronounce correctly, is so convincing. It's so scary that if I were to see this man out on the streets, I would think he was actually like that. I mean, I know the movie came out some 50 years ago, but you get what I mean. The camera work is really creative. There are a lot of scenes where the actors or actresses are looking up at a camera suspended high above, pointing down at them. And it's a very creative angle that I can't think of off the top of my head that I've seen anywhere else. But that's just one example of the crazy camera work. The story is really good. It's really creepy. And even though I feel like I gave away too much with telling you kind of about the cremator and what he does, that might be a little bit of a spoiler, but definitely watch this movie. It's one of the best horror movies I've ever watched, although I would consider it like more suspense. And my last movie of the 1960s that I watched on this challenge was Midnight Cowboy. My really good friend Brian said it's one of his favorite movies, so I had to include this on my list, and I'm really glad I did. It stars Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman as a dynamic duo. They're friends. They're kind of unlikely an unlikely pairing. Set in New York City, Jon Voight plays a hustler who's like a gigolo, and he befriends Dustin Hoffman's character, and hilarity ensues. But it's also about a really close bond between these two guys. And it's a beautiful movie. I really enjoy the acting from both sides, Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman. And it also has a really good soundtrack, so bonus points for that.
It's time for the big splash.
Okay, so my big splash recommendation for 1969 album is gonna be Abbey Road by the Beatles. Now, although it's not my favorite album by the Beatles, my favorite being a 1967 between Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Magical Mystery Tour. It was beat out by Jimi Hendrix. So anyway, Abbey Road is a fantastic album, has a lot of great songs on it. It's a great close to the 60s. Of course, it has the iconic cover. I went to Abbey Road and did that same pose with my good friend. So besides being sentimental, the album is just plain good. I feel like it's more stripped down. It is more true. It relies less on studio tactics and more on just the raw talent of the Beatles. And I love it. And coming from someone who likes more of their layered work with a lot more studio additions, this album is fantastic as well. I love it. It's A+. I would definitely recommend Abbey Road. And the movie of the year for me, my big splash recommendation is gonna be The Cremator. It was such an unsuspecting hit for me. I saw the cover, I took a chance on it. I didn't read too much about it, as I normally don't before watching a movie, and I was so pleasantly surprised. It was fantastic. Very creepy, very stylized. The dialogue is cool. Again, I'm reading subtitles, but I'm in it. I'm engaged. And for me, if I'm forgetting that I'm reading subtitles and I'm still actively scared and I'm still actively on the edge of my seat as if it's happening live, that's a fantastic film. Cremator definitely has my vote.
Hey, it's the look.
All right, divers, it's time for the look. This one was so cool because this is shifting away from the beauty makeup and now we're getting into more body paint. So this is something I hope to bring into the 70s. On this project, my friend Amy graciously volunteered her time. This definitely took a little bit longer than a simple beauty makeup or even a more intricate beauty makeup, but she was such a sport. My aim was to model Amy's look exactly on the cover of the Woodstock movie for the poster. And it came out perfectly. I asked her before I even realized how perfectly her hair matches the model on the cover of it. So it just worked out perfectly for my last year. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Funny enough, I tried doing research to find out who the model is, and I can't find any information on who it is or if even that person was at Woodstock. I think from what I can recall, the movie poster was for like a re-release of the footage. The movie was released the following year after Woodstock, and the poster that I'm pulling inspiration from is like from a re-release. I might be wrong on that. You can let me know in the comments, but if you know who that is, that would be really great because I was really stumped. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. This was such a fun adventure. It was a really ambitious goal of mine, and it was just really cool to share it with an audience. The 1960s was such a beautiful decade full of art, music, culture, movies. If you have any suggestions for the 70s, or even something you would have liked to see in the 60s, or music suggestions, movie suggestions, I'm all ears. Just let me know in the comments and I will be sure to read them. I am open for anything you have to recommend to me. I'm like a sponge, just give it up. Now that I'm wrapped up with the 60s, I'll be moving on to the 70s in the series. So if there's anything you'd like to see, just let me know. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time. If you want, you can always check out my website, madeupbymaddie.com, where you can see my blog, view my portfolio. My site is available in English and in Spanish, and of course you can contact me or book me as I am a worldwide makeup artist and I would love to be a part of your world. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again next time.